Hello to everyone who's listening to us on that 24-hour stream of Młodzi Razem. Today's topic that we're gonna talk about is the situation of Ukrainian workers. With me is representative from social movement from Ukraine.
Hello, my name is Vitaly Dudin. I'm the leader of NGO social movement or социальный рух, and I'm ready to talk about labor rights in Ukraine and Poland.
Okay. First, I'm a bit curious, and probably the viewers are also. Are you currently in Ukraine?
Sorry?
Are you currently in Ukraine, like right now?
Yes, it was quiet at morning, but then situation changed. We heard some air raid sirens. Now situation stabilizes. So we live in such conditions for some time, and of course it affects our everyday life. It's hard to make any long-term plans, but such sphere as employment should continue to work further because people need money for their lives and for their families. So situation changes very dynamically. So we should be ready to everything.
I see. Okay, so the first question I've got for you is how has the war realistically affected the state of the Ukrainian labor market? And what is the life of an ordinary Ukrainian worker like because of it?
I can say that the life of ordinary Ukrainian worker was tough and hard, but starting from the 24th of February, it turned terrible because the dangers are very high. It is very risky to go on the workplace where you can be hit by the rocket bombs and so on. I can say that starting from this year, uh, about 150 workers uh, were killed. No, they died during complication of their labor obligations, and a lot of people died from the Russian rockets and bombs. Um, if we see the statistics after the 24th of February, about 80% of people they died because of actions of invaders.
Okay, I see. And as we all know, a lot of Ukrainians transferred to Poland to seek safety, and a lot of them are trying to live a normal life here as much as they can. A lot of them are looking for a job currently, and would you say there are significant differences between Poland and Ukraine in terms of labor law? And if so, what are they?
Um, I can say that Ukraine and Poland has a lot of in common because our labor legislation came from the socialist era. Of course, those laws they're not pro-socialist, but they still have some defensive guarantees for the workers as well. as Ukrainian as well as Polish. But I can say that Polish labor code is more updated, is more harmonized with European directives. Ukrainian labor code still protects workers from illegal dismissal in a very strict way. Of course, there are some strong guarantees connected with working time, occupational health and safety, and we observe the prescription of wide trade union guarantees. But Polish labor code is better in such issues like anti-discrimination, like social dialogue, like atypical employment relations. Those provisions are not detailed in Ukrainian legislation. So we can say that there are some technical differences in legal norms, but I want to mention the biggest difference. There is a problem in enforcement of labor laws in Ukraine. I think that about 30% of people they're working in Ukraine without complying with any legislation. It's so-called shadow labor market. As I know, the work of labor inspection in Poland is much more effective, and the level of informal employment is much more lower. Of course, I don't say that the situation is perfect. I think that it's better for you to say how it is. But in Ukraine, informal employment is a big problem, and a lot of people say that I don't want to work in Ukraine because I will receive no pension, no social insurance, and it becomes a justification to relocate to Poland.
Yeah, sure. And a lot of people who start to work here in Poland, I mean, refugees from Ukraine, uh, because of the differences between Poland's and Ukraine's terms of labor law, do you think they have the knowledge about it, like the knowledge of the Polish labor law? Are they aware of their rights? Because obviously there is it's a good situation to use refugees for some of the businesses that want to, I don't know, have cheaper employees, etc. Just because people are trying to live, we can say that they just try to survive, and people want to use that for their advantage.
As a lawyer practitioner in field of labor law, I can say that people have a small knowledge about Ukrainian labor legislation.
Mhm.
So I think that knowledge about Polish labor legislation, they are even more limited. But people know some basic things. They can differentiate between, for example, employment contract, which gives more protection, and between civil law contract, which provides lesser guarantees. So I think that experience gives the knowledge people who worked in Poland, they see Polish system as rational and logical. So I think that it's not a problem to receive any needed information. And I want to mention that it's good that your labor inspectorate and the trade unions um, they spreading information about Polish employment legislation in Ukrainian. Of course, it helps our people very much.
Then would you say that Ukrainians might feel discriminated against in the Polish labor market?
I think that there is a problem of discrimination, but it's not so serious.
Mhm.
A lot of people ready to work in Poland, and it's hard to remind any significant examples of discriminations. Mm, Of course, there is structural problems that a lot of our citizens they are not members of trade unions, for example, or they are ready to work informally and illegally. Some of our citizens are ready to work on such conditions, and of course, according to that, uh, their working conditions can be mm, worse than in Polish population, for example. But I think that there is no big problem of discrimination of Ukrainian workers in Poland.
Yeah, I would
If
say
they,
Polish people have a lot of sympathy for Ukraine right now because of our history, because of the fact that Ukraine is our neighbor, obviously, and I feel like a lot of people in current situation put their whole heart to help this situation. But would you say that it's easier to find a job for Ukrainians in Poland than other neighboring countries?
I think you're right. I can agree with you because the majority of people who moved abroad, they moved to Poland.
Yeah.
It was so before the war started in Ukraine and after the war. I see that it is much more easier to integrate in Polish society than in other societies. And I can mention the legislative changes that your authorities imposed some rules which even make easier for Ukrainians to stay and to work in Poland. So I see some good tendencies. Of course, there is a question of equality of treatment, but I think if our people will join unions, Polish unions, it affect their lives in better way and affect the existence of whole Polish society in better way. And of course, after acquiring such experience of fighting for the better conditions, Ukrainians can go back to Ukraine and spread such practical experience, because now our unions, they're rather weak, I can say, and we need to improve their efficiency.
Yeah, there's always a place for improvement. But would you say we can expect Ukrainians transferring to the west side of Europe, like Germany, France, etc., since there's a lot of people in Poland currently?
Of course, I know that a lot of people, they moved even further in countries like Germany and even France. Some went to the Italy, but of course it's more easier to start work in Poland
Because of the language.
because of the language demands from employers. They're almost the same, and the rules of employment, they also similar, because as I told from the beginning, we have labor law systems which have a lot of in common.
Yeah. And do you think the Ukrainian labor, how do you think the Ukrainian labor market will look like after the war?
It's a good question. Mm, I hope that Ukraine has a possibility for quick economical growth during post-war rebuilding and restructuring. I hope that we will receive enough financial aid, and our government will receive additional resources, for example, to spend money on different active labor market programs. But today, our labor market is not perfect. I want to be honest. Uh, According to some data which I saw in the beginning of April, about 50% of employed population had lost their job. Every half of the people lost their income or job. I think that some of those people were still employed, but they received no money from their employers. Their status was rather complicated. And of course, there is a problem of labor laws, labor law enforcement, because our government announced moratorium on labor inspections. So if employers pay no salary for the worker cannot go to state labor service, state labor inspection, and make a application in order to organize an inspection.
And how do you think the war will affect the development of workers and trade union movements in Ukraine?
Uh, for this moment, I see some benefits for our employers, because it became much more difficult to find work, because according to official data, the quantity of vacancies is fallen twice. So it's hard to find a new job. So people should respect their employer and agree with different form of deterioration of their working conditions. So it's a big problem because people have no enough power to demand better working conditions. In that time, our parliament imposed a so-called law on organizing of labor relations during martial law. So called law number 2136. It provides additional rights to our employers. For example, they can suspend the employment contract.
Mhm.
It was illegal from the start of war, but then, after a month have passed, our deputies allowed our employers not to pay wages. And of course, it's a serious problem. Mm, Of course, the social tensions, they're growing between workers and employers. And it's not a good background for post-war development. I think that our government should play more active role on labor market. They cannot allow every employer to do whatever they want. They should enforce basic labor laws, which provide people right for living wage and so on.
Yeah, and
So
speaking of that, uh, what post-war solutions do you expect from the Ukrainian government and neighboring countries to ensure a decent life for all Ukrainian workers?
firstly, I want to admit the role of supervision over compliance with labor standards. I think that our government can borrow some experience from your country, from Poland. Second, I think that our government should invest more in subsidized employment, for example, for different vulnerable categories of workers like youth, like women with children, like people with disabilities. It needs a lot of money, but Ukraine can cancel its foreign debt in order to acquire additional resources. And I want to appreciate the role of party Razem, which helped our country to promote the demand for debt cancellation for Ukraine. And the third, we need more democracy at workplaces. Every decisions should be negotiated in democratical way. Employers should negotiate with their workers because now the level of social dialogue is very low.
I see. Well, those were all of my questions for you that I've got today. Do you have anything that you want to add?
I want to congratulate everyone with International Workers' Day. In Ukraine, in this year, we have no big demonstration, but we see that our support from the world grows and grows. And I think that in post-war period we will have a wide opportunities for development of trade union movement as democratic socialist movement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, too. Well, it was nice to talk with you and to have you there. And that will be all from us.